how much does our past really shape who we are today?
Yeah.
I mean, can you ever truly outrun your own story? Just leave it all behind. Imagine thinking you've got it all figured out, and then bam, a single diagnosis just flips everything on its head. Forces you to look back, really look back.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we're jumping in today. We're going to explore something really profound, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, C-PTSD. But this isn't just, a clinical rundown. We're diving into a very personal story, Stephanie Foo's memoir, What My Bones Know. It's her journey, right, through the diagnosis, the kind of startling science behind trauma, and this messy, winding path she took towards healing.
All right. So our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack the key differences between regular PTSD and this complex form, C-PTSD. We'll dig into how it affects both your mind and your body, often in hidden ways, and we'll look at the sometimes pretty unconventional ways Stephanie found to manage and heal. Get ready for some real aha moments, because honestly, her perspective might just shift how you think about resilience and self-acceptance too. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so Stephanie, the author, she'd been in therapy for 8 years with Samantha, her therapist. At first, it was for what she kind of jokingly called San Francisco problems, like, relationship stuff and INTJ tech nerd boyfriend, funny line. But it got deeper pretty fast, dealing with depression, anxiety, especially around work and friends. Then, almost a decade in, Samantha drops this bombshell, just says, not just PTSD, complex PTSD. So for someone already in therapy thinking they're making progress, why is that specific distinction, complex PTSD, such a shock? What's the big difference?
That's really the crux of it, isn't it? Traditional PTSD, the kind most of us kind of know about, it's usually tied to a single major event, like a car crash, maybe combat, a natural disaster, something with a clear start and end. But C-PTSD, it's different. It stems from continual abuse or trauma, stuff that happens over a long time, years even, often in situations you just can't escape from, like childhood. Child abuse is a really common cause, unfortunately. Understanding that difference, the ongoing nature, is absolutely vital to understanding Stephanie's story. It suggests the wounds run much, much deeper.
Wow, yeah, you can really feel the weight of that for her. She immediately Googles it and finds this terrifying list of symptoms: trouble keeping jobs, relationship problems, neediness, hypervigilance, aggression, addiction risks, impulsivity. And the one that really hit her, apparently, was that C-PTSD patients spend their lives trying to avoid abandonment. It just slammed into her, this feeling of being broken.
Yeah.
And realizing, that just trying to run from her past wasn't working. This diagnosis meant she had to turn around and face it properly.
Exactly. And that feeling of being broken, while totally understandable, is something we see a lot with C-PTSD. It's not really about being broken, though. It's more like having a system that's been deeply injured, but is still fundamentally trying to protect itself in the only way it knows how. So yeah, this diagnosis often compels people to revisit their past, almost like a detective, which is just what Stephanie did. She knew she had to understand the origins to heal.
And what a past to revisit. She talks about these really sharp contrasts, right?
Yeah.
Her early childhood in Malaysia versus later in the U.S. Malaysia was like this place that loved her. Safe, family, food, freedom. Sounds idyllic. But then America, that's where the memories turn dark. Welts and white knuckles, she calls it. And for years, she clung to this idea that her auntie favored her because she was the eldest son's firstborn child. Like a little shield against the chaos. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It shows how those early experiences aren't just things that happen to us. They actually build the foundation of who we become. The memoir goes into some really harrowing details about the abuse from her mother. Like the time her journal entry got edited, resulting in a C- and then a beating with a plastic ruler. Not for mistakes, but for not being interesting enough, or using the word then too much.
Oh my God, that's just brutal.
And it wasn't isolated. There were regular beatings for tiny things, not making eye contact, how she sat, using American slang, even just opening a magazine. Her mother used anything: hands, chopsticks, toys, rulers, bamboo canes, until they broke. And the emotional abuse was relentless, too, saying things like, "What did I do to deserve an ungrateful, useless child? She ruined my life. Take her back." Or even life-threatening moments. Being thrown downstairs by her hair, a cleaver held over her wrist, and maybe the cruelest part. Her mother blamed her own suicide attempts on Stephanie, telling her every time her stomach twisted after that, she told me it was my fault.
Just imagining a child having to absorb that day after day. It just explains so much about the C-PTSD later on. It's baked in. And her father, his role sounds incredibly damaging, too. After the divorce, he just emotionally vanished, abandoned her. And then this terrifying car terrorism, swerving into traffic, speeding, laughing, threatening to kill them both, which led Stephanie to this desperate, chilling moment of holding an axe over him while he slept, just seeking some kind of control, I guess. As a teenager, she was often alone, living off shoplifted food, not even knowing his friend was actually his secret wife. I mean, with all that, how did she even cope? How did she manage to build any kind of life?
It's staggering, isn't it? Facing that level of sustained trauma, she developed these really intense survival strategies, coping mechanisms. A big one was this relentless drive for perfection, always needing external validation. Faster mile times, perfect grades, flawless performances. Journalism, she says, became her first portfolio, a marker of value, a way to shape the chaos into something purposeful, something controlled. It was about controlling something when her life felt completely out of control. She also used other ways to cope, like self-medicating with Sudafed, spending hours online at night, just trying to numb out or escape, really.
So she pushes through, builds this amazing career, producer for Snap, dream job at This American Life, wins an Emmy. Looks like success from the outside. But inside, still this constant dread, self-doubt, anxiety, emotional meltdowns, feeling like something had happened that was about to end me.
It really shows that external achievements they don't erase the internal pain, do they? So why is healing so hard for C-PTSD, even when someone is in therapy? Well, a huge hurdle, believe it or not, is that C-PTSD isn't officially in the DSM-5. That's the main diagnostic manual for mental health. Now, institutions like the VA in the US and the NHS in the UK recognize it, but its absence from the DSM means less research, less literature, fewer trained therapists. Many clinicians just don't have the framework to diagnose or treat it effectively. And this ties into what Stephanie learned about trauma brain, how the brain starts linking danger to completely random things, like seeing a Krispy Kreme sign and feeling pure terror.
Krispy Kreme equals danger. That's
Yeah.
wild. How does that work? What does that do to you day to day?
Well, essentially, the traumatized brain becomes this hypersensitive alarm system, always on high alert. Doesn't just remember the obvious threats, it creates this huge web of associations. Any sight, sound, smell present during trauma can get coded as dangerous. So yeah, maybe the smell of donuts, a certain tone of voice, a word, it can instantly trigger that fight, flight, freeze response. Floods your body with stress hormones. You become hyper-alert, chronically anxious, constantly misreading cues, like seeing a tiny frown line as rage, even when it's not there. It's a survival instinct gone haywire in everyday life because the threat isn't real anymore, but your body reacts like it is.
Okay, that explains the constant dread she felt. And then there's the ACE study, right? Adverse Childhood Experiences. This questionnaire measures different childhood traumas, abuse, neglect, family issues. And the findings are, well, they're shocking. High ACE scores are linked to way worse adult health, like 3 times the risk of liver disease, double the cancer or heart disease risk, 4 times emphysema risk, and huge jumps in alcoholism, depression, suicide attempts. These aren't just numbers.
No, definitely not just numbers. They show, really starkly, that childhood trauma isn't just in your head, it's a physical assault on your whole system. It can literally shorten your life, make you much more vulnerable to all sorts of chronic illnesses. It's a physiological burden, not just psychological. That changes everything about how we should view health. And the biology is sobering. We now know chronic stress, all those chemicals like cortisol and adrenaline flooding the system, can actually change brain structure. The amygdala, the fear center, gets bigger. The prefrontal cortex, needed for reasoning and control, can shrink. It can even shorten telomeres, the caps on our DNA, potentially taking like 20 years off your life expectancy.
But, and this is important, Robert Anabilda, one of the lead ACE researchers, later pointed out these scores predict trends in populations, not an individual's destiny. The brain is remarkably adaptable. It's always hope for healing.
Right, okay, so armed with all this knowledge, the diagnosis, the brain science, the ACE stuff, how did Stephanie start to actually, hack her brain? Where did she begin the healing process? Well, the very first step, and it was a huge one, was leaving her high-stress job. She basically said, healing needs to be my job now. That was critical. Then she learned about neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett's work on metabolic deficits. This is the idea that basic physical needs, sleep, water, food, are directly linked to our emotions. And for someone with C-PTSD, neglecting these basics makes everything worse. It deepens that feeling of being disconnected from your own body, that everyday bodily dissociation she talked about. So healing had to start with the physical foundations, taking care of her body.
That makes total sense, connecting the physical and emotional. Okay, so one therapy she tried that sounds really interesting is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Can you explain that a bit? It involves revisiting trauma while moving your eyes, sometimes with buzzers. What did that do for her?
Yeah, EMDR can be incredibly powerful. For Stephanie, it led to this massive visceral breakthrough. She described being in a session, revisiting a memory of a childhood beating. But this time, something clicked. She had this profound realization. I was constantly having to beg my parents to believe they were loved. That was my primary job as their child. It wasn't about excusing the abuse, not at all. It was about seeing, finally, that her child self was desperately trying to earn love that wasn't actually available. And she didn't just think it, she felt it like a blade through flesh. Feeling the raw horror and sadness allowed that memory to finally process, to lose some of its power, which led her to this heartbreaking but freeing mantra: my parents didn't love me, and it's okay. It was about letting go of that impossible childhood task.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
But as she found out, EMDR wasn't like a magic cure-all, right? The dread, the dissociation, it came back. So she kept exploring, moved into mindfulness, restorative yoga, finding ways to ground herself through her senses. What was the goal there? What was she trying to change internally?
She was aiming at her default mode network, the DMN. You can think of the DMN as the brain's background hum. It's active when your mind wanders, when you're reflecting, maybe worrying, ruminating. For Stephanie, her DMN was often the seat of responsibility and insecurity, just constantly replaying hurts or predicting disasters, overdrive. So practices like yoga, focusing intently on her senses, on just being in her body in the present moment, help turn down that internal volume. And she describes experiencing, maybe for the first time, this immense full-body pleasure of simply being alive. Quieting the noise allowed something else to emerge.
She also tried psilocybin shrooms, which she said gave her temporary but really potent feelings of self-love, perspective, less ego, also suppressing that DMN.
Yeah.
But obviously access is an issue and the effects didn't last. A more sustainable thing she found was gratitude. How did a gratitude journal help with such deep trauma?
It sounds simple, but it's actually quite profound neurobiologically. It actively works against the brain's negativity bias, which trauma massively amplifies. By deliberately keeping a gratitude journal, she trained herself to witness the good along with the bad, to notice and register small positive moments, acts of kindness, bits of connection. It wasn't about pretending the pain wasn't there. It was about consciously shifting her attention, balancing the scales a bit. And over time, that actually helped lift her baseline mood. It's a daily practice of tuning into the positive.
Okay, so as she's doing all this internal work, she also starts connecting her own trauma to bigger pictures, right?
Yeah.
Ancestral trauma, community trauma. How did that unfold?
It really started clicking when she went back to San Jose, where she grew up. Suddenly, she saw beauty and life there she'd never noticed before because her dissociation had been so thick. That was one piece. Then she started talking to old friends, teachers from that time, and the floodgates opened. She discovered that abuse among immigrant kids in that community was actually widespread, but kept silent, hidden under the pressure of the model minority myth. It was this huge realization. This wasn't just me, this was systemic.
Wow, finding out your private pain is actually part of a shared hidden history. That must have been both devastating and validating.
Exactly, and it led her even further back to exploring transgenerational trauma. She learned about her family's history in Malaysia, the Malayan emergency, her grandfather being imprisoned, her great-grandmother's struggles to survive. She saw this pattern, this inheritance, she called it, of just swallowing pain, of obfuscation passed down through generations. And this isn't just theory, there's real science behind it now, epigenetics. Studies, even in mice, show trauma can leave marks on genes that get passed down, affecting later generations. Our ancestors' coping mechanisms, even the painful ones, can literally echo in our biology.
This healing path is clearly so layered and sometimes involves really difficult choices, like estranging herself from her father. She knew it wasn't about finding joy in it, but it was necessary for her own safety and well-being, accepting that the love she craved just wasn't coming from him. How did she cope with that loss, that void?
That's where the idea of a chosen family becomes so important. Her partner Joey's family was crucial. They offered this radical acceptance. His mother actually said to her, well, forget about them. We're your family now. You're ours. That kind of unconditional love started to fill that space. And alongside that, she really committed to self-parenting. Using therapy models like internal family systems, IFS, and meditation, IFS helps you connect with different parts of yourself, like that wounded inner child, and offer them the compassion and care they never got. She describes it as exhausting, full of the sadness of a lost childhood, but absolutely vital, learning to provide that love and safety for herself from the inside.
And the mind-body link just keeps showing up. Her endometriosis diagnosis, for instance. Learning that women with childhood trauma are 80% more likely to get it. It highlights that sort of sexist irony she mentions, PTSD often being seen as a male thing, when women actually have it more often and it hits their physiology, their hormones, so hard. It really underlines why self-advocacy in healthcare is so critical. Learning to fire doctors or therapists who dismiss your reality, who say things like, tell your psychiatrist about your mental health stuff, don't tell me, and finding people who get the trauma-body connection.
Absolutely. Which brings us to what makes a therapist truly attuned, especially for complex trauma. Stephanie found Dr. Ham. He used this fascinating method of doing a close reading of her therapy transcripts. He helped her see her trauma rage like the Hulk as anger spiked, her thinking got fuzzier, self-awareness dropped. His approach wasn't about quick fixes. It was about digging into the transcripts together, spotting these unconscious patterns, the self-criticism, the way she deflect or dissociate right there in her own words.
And he introduced concepts like emotional disarmament and attuned love. Can you unpack those? They sound really powerful.
Yeah, they are. Emotional disarmament isn't about being weak. It's about consciously choosing not to meet conflict with defensiveness or aggression, lowering your weapons, basically. And attuned love is about approaching conflict or just interacting with real curiosity, asking, what is hurting you right now? Instead of reacting out of your own fear or anger. He showed her how empathy and attunement are way more effective than punishment, which he argued just demolishes relationships and community. So this close reading extended beyond therapy. She learned to analyze her own interactions, notice her misattunements in conversations with friends, and then practice meta-communicating, actually talking about how she was feeling or what was happening in the conversation. It's ongoing work. And that's really the takeaway, isn't it? Healing from C-PTSD isn't a destination you arrive at. It's an ongoing process, a commitment, as she puts it, a duty to take better care of myself emotionally, always navigating the past and the present.
So wrapping this up, what does Stephanie Foo's journey mean for you listening right now?
Well, this deep dive really shows that while trauma can take so much, it truly doesn't have to dictate your entire future. Understanding these layers, the complexity of CPTSD, the mind-body connection, the unconventional paths to healing it, offers huge insights into resilience, into the power of advocating for yourself, and into that universal search we all have for love, connection, belonging. Even if sometimes that means reparenting yourself and building your own chosen family from the ground up. It's a powerful testament to our capacity to change and heal.
It really is. And it leaves us with a thought, doesn't it? If our bodies hold on to every hurt, as the science suggests,
Yeah.
what else might they be holding on to unconsciously?
Yeah.
What sources of strength, maybe wisdom, or even just overlooked beauty from our past might still be there waiting? Is there some hidden Eden, some forgotten source of goodness within your own story waiting for you to rediscover it? Not as a place of pain, but maybe, just maybe, as a source of your own inherent worth?